Year-over-year vehicle sales were up yet again in May. I'm Karl Brauer, editor-at-large at Edmunds.com, and we're going to discuss that. I've got Jeremy Anwyl, our CEO, and Jassica Caldwell, our senior analyst. Jeremy, it beat all the expectations. What's this mean?
Well, I think May numbers look like they were a bit of a surprise. Last week we were looking at the sales tracking. I think we forecast 11.4. Everybody else was right around 11, and yet they came in at 11.6 is the official number. So, Jassica, you're the expert. Why did this happen?
Well, I mean, I think, what did we have this past weekend? We had Memorial Day, big sales, big advertisement for sales, people still suffering, still looking at their bottom line and not seeing it budge much. So they're coming to the dealership looking for deals, and I think that's where we saw the big push, that combined with a real big healthy fleet number for domestic cars.
So I think that's important noting, because Memorial Weekend is always the big weekend. It's kind of the kickoff for the summer selling season. And I think when we looked at our forecast, we talked about it last week, and we assumed a lift for Memorial Weekend. It just came out to be bigger, I think, than people would have normally expected. Is that about right?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, again, I think people are waiting to hear that value message, and people have been struggling for the past year and a half, and there's a lot of pent-up demand out there. So they're ready to pull the trigger when that value message speaks to them. And I think Memorial Day weekend kind of gives dealers as well as manufacturers that opportunity.
Kind of interesting, because the headline for the month is that incentives are down and sales are up, and yet it's not quite that simple when you start to look at it on a week-by-week basis, is it?
Right. I mean, I think we all noticed that May started out so slow and kind of left us wondering, oh, well, this is not good news, what's going on? I think manufacturers took note too, and hence the month started to wrap up, and they were saying we need to juice these incentives, otherwise May is going to look pretty dismal.
So incentives for the month are down, but for the last weekend of the month actually were pretty strong.
Yeah, I would say definitely strong for some brands. You know, there are big truck incentives, especially at Chevy and GM.
But you know, I think what was interesting too was that fleet played a bigger role, I think, than most people expected it to. But fleet was able to help out big fleet sellers like the domestics. You know, you still had companies like Toyota, which has a certain amount of fleet sales, but they still barely beat their numbers from last year. And let's not forget, last year the market was in massive turmoil. So if you can't beat your numbers from last year, I mean, Chrysler's up, 20, 30%, and Toyota's up 7%. That's quite a statement of its own.
Toyota, I think, is a unique case because of some of the safety recall issues that they were struggling with earlier this year, and they obviously triggered a very large sales month in March. It seems like a lot of the Toyota loyalists, that demand has kind of been met, and there's a bit of a payback period going on for Toyota, which would explain their kind of flat performance in May.
Yeah, and they're strong. I mean, because they're doing mostly retail. Fleet is kind of staying away from Toyota. Chrysler's picking up that slack, so are some of the other domestics. So it may not be as bad a case if you look at how strong they are on the retail side.
Any notable success stories last month?
Some incredible records. I mean, Audi, Hyundai, and Subaru all had record months. So within this kind of general uptick that we're seeing in sales, you have individual companies out there that are breaking all their past records.
You talk about an uptick in sales. I think it's worth noting that this is a relative uptick. So you see the headlines and it's like happy days are here again, but I think the reality is that the car industry is still in recession. These are awful sales numbers. They're not quite as awful as last year. So let's talk about the rest of the year. Key question, because everyone was sort of forecasting 11.5, 12 million units this year. It's starting to look a little fuzzy as to whether those numbers can be hit. I mean, do you have any personal update on that forecast?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be a struggle to hit that point. I mean, we're already 5 months into the year, and you take an average of those 5 months, we're in the low 11s. So unless we're hitting 12s and even 13s, it's going to be a struggle to even get to that 11.5. I mean, that said, I think we'll see a strong summer as people are deal seeking, and summer is a great time to get deals, and maybe year end.
One caveat though, and that is an inventory.
That's true.
They're getting a little lean. So this could be an unusual summer. We kind of triggered it a little early with some of the sales that occurred in March, and some manufacturers are running very lean from an inventory perspective. Suggests that incentives this summer may not be as strong as you'd normally expect. Consumers sometimes disassociate the incentive. They buy because they think it's a good deal.
Right.
Maybe it's not such a good deal. So it's just very ambiguous to me in terms of how the summer's going to play out. But even if it's a strong summer, I think there's reason for caution moving into the fall because there's no deals traditionally coming up in October, November, and December, and we could see a fairly soft close to the year.
Right.
But on that somber note,
well, that'll be a month from now. We'll check in. It'll be halfway through the year. Until then, I want to thank Jeremy and Jassica for joining us. And if you want more information, please check out Auto Observer for the latest industry analysis and news.